Welcome to the Young Changemakers podcast. I am your host, Megan Diaz, and this is a global Changemakers production. If you would like to know more about the programs and resources available for you, go check global-changemakers.net. Enjoy the show. Hello, welcome to the Young Changemakers podcast. Today we're going to be talking about youth, peace, and security, and we're talking about it with Wevyn. Wevyn, we're very happy to have you here, and we know that you're a global advocate for this topic precisely, youth, peace, and security, and you have worked in the field in Africa. You have briefed the United Nations Security Council in New York on this matter, and even advised for UNICEF. Could you please share with us some insights into your journey as a youth advocate for peace and security? And overall, what started your activism in this field?
Yeah, thank you so much, Megan. I'm so excited to join the podcast today and talk about my favorite topic, which is youth, peace, and security. So back to how it started. So it all started from where I grew up. I grew up in a place called Muganda. It's in Mombasa, which is an island in Kenya. And basically, I did grow up in a very difficult environment, a lot of poverty. Very few people used to complete their tertiary education or even pursue tertiary education. So my first encounter with violence was really when I was like 4 years old. That was the ethnic clashes in Mombasa called Kaya Bombo. And then in 2007, I encountered violence again. So I'm talking about like big scale violence, right? So the 2007 encountered the post-election violence that, was as a result of a lot of people disputing the general elections in Kenya. But it wasn't until like 2014 when I really started to feel convicted to act on the different insecurity situations in Mombasa. And this was because of the growing violent extremism and terrorism situation in Mombasa. So there was a lot of young people, some of whom I knew personally, being recruited to violent extremist groups, to gang groups. Some had allegedly joined terrorist groups. And so coming back from university, graduating from university and coming back to this situation back home to some of my friends, my peers, like not there, but also living in very difficult situations or having been recruited to become violent, really convicted me to get into this. So I started by writing, just because I thought, if we're going to take action, we need information, we need knowledge. And at the time, I got an internship at a human rights organization that enabled me to understand more about the complexity of violent extremism and terrorism in Mombasa. So I knew it wasn't just young people wanting to cause harm, but it's because of the injustice that they had gone through their whole childhood, something that I could resonate with. So I thought that, why not use my voice and use my time and my resources to work with my friends, my peers, other young people in Mombasa, and, build peace as opposed to inflicting violence and harm in the communities.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing with us how everything started. I think it's very valuable to hear that you decided to not stay idle and start with writing. It's a good way to start. I think everyone has different approaches, but it was so interesting to hear how it was in your specific case. And we are talking about youth, peace, and security. This is the terminology, this is the language that is used, but I'm sure that there's many people who are not familiar with what it means. It's, a nexus between many words that encompass many things. The United Nations has overall recognized the importance of youth in peace building through precisely its youth, peace, and security agenda. But could you please share with us, to start with, what do we understand as the youth, peace, and security agenda, and what are the components of it, especially in the UN sphere?
Yeah, thank you very much. So, the formal, definition of it is this resolution that was adopted by the UN Security Council in 2015. So, Security Council Resolution 2250, that recognizes the role that young people play in building international peace and security. So a resolution, it's legally binding, but it's not necessarily a law in the countries, right? So this is like a global policy framework of some sort. But when it comes to, simply put, it just means that for the first time, the UN was able to document that they do recognize the role that young people play in building peace and security, in contributing to international peace and security. So a lot of people tend to confuse that, before this resolution, young people were not building peace, which is a lie. Young people have been building peace, but the perspective and the notion was primarily that young people are the ones causing harm, that they are the violent people, that they are the group that needs to be empowered, to be addressed, not really recognizing that youth are actually peace builders. I mean, of course, we're not disputing the fact that some young people are violent, but that's not a majority of the young people. So the agenda in itself, to me, was more of reclaiming the narrative around youth identity and what the role that young people play in building peace and security. So it has 5 key components. The first one is participation, where the agenda mandates that young people have to be involved or have to participate in peace building processes from the local level all the way to the global level. Then the second thing is prevention, and this agenda mandates that institutions and stakeholders must do everything they can to ensure that they prevent conflict and they prevent young people from engaging in violent activities. And then the third part is the protection. Protection calls for the protection of the rights of young people. So whichever rights, human rights, all of these have to be upheld. And it also calls for the protection of young people who are caught in conflict situations. So those who are actively in war zones, in conflict zones. The agenda mandates that stakeholders must do everything they can to protect these young people. Then the next one is partnerships. And this is very key, actually, because it calls for partnering with young people to build peace. So not looking at young people as beneficiaries of peace, but rather as active contributors. And so the best way to do that is to engage with them, is to co-create and to partner with them in doing this. And then finally, it's disintegration and reintegration. Yeah. Disengagement and reintegration, where it calls for young people who have already been engaged, so those who've been radicalized, those who are already in terrorist groups, in violent groups, in extremist groups. It calls for institutions to put in measures to disengage them, to disarm them, but that's not it. Is to also empower them, rehabilitate them, and reintegrate them back into the society as people who are also peace builders in the society. So these are the key components. And really, when you look at the YPS agenda, it's a mandate of the member states, but it also recognizes that young people are part of the process.
Thank you so much for explaining this, and overall for explaining the link that it has with the United Nations Security Council. Because if we know this agenda, it stems from the resolution, as you explained it very well, and you also highlighted the different components of it, which as a coincidence, most of them start with P. So participation, prevention, protection, partnerships, and the last one that start with a P, but as well equally important, disengagement and the reintegration of youth. And as you mentioned, this is part of changing the narrative. You interpreted it as changing the narrative towards young people being able to contribute to peace because they have been contributing to peace, and it was mostly invisible at an international scale. I think it's important to highlight what are some of the contributions that young people are making in fostering global peace. Do you have any examples, or could you please share with us a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So the beauty about like youth peace building work is that it's so diverse and it's so creative that it's very difficult to say young people are building peace in this way. So I'll give examples, and I'll categorize them in three ways. So the first one is we have the peer to peer youth engagement. So, like, how, let's say, me and you engage, we can talk about different topics. I can and inform you on certain issues on peace and security. You can do the same on your end. And this is cross cutting. You see it at the local level, at the national level, at the global level. When you look at the way youth groups are formed in communities, it's people within the same age group that want to come together for a common cause. And this is the most common way that young people are building peace. So you look at the, young people are hosting dialogues either amongst themselves or organizing dialogues with other generations. You see the use of sports as a way to mobilize young people and empower them. You see young people using art. You see young people are innovating, are running social businesses. All of this, because at the heart of it is that, peace and security seems too technical. But when you look at the roots, why do young people engage in violent activities? It comes down to the root problems, which is unemployment, maybe they don't have a social safety net, well-being, all of these issues. And you see how young people are forming initiatives and running campaigns that address all of these issues. So for me, this, especially at the grassroots level, that's some of the most successful ways in which young people are building peace. And then the second is the youth as experts. So we're seeing more and more young professionals going into government, going into decision making and leadership, and really using their expertise in whatever theme it is. You could be an expert at mental health, but you're young, and so and you understand the realities of being young. So when you're forming policies as part of your 9 to 5 or as part of your job, you're able to incorporate your lived experiences into it. So youth as experts, it also, more and more we're seeing a lot of institutions coming up with focal points or youth advisory roles or youth expertise roles. And this has really widened the engagement. Not to say that they've been the most successful, but we've seen a lot of progress in terms of incorporating youth voices into decision making. And finally, youth activists and peace builders. And youth activists don't get enough recognition, enough resources, and enough support. But they really do the work. You see how young people are at the front lines of protests, whether that's in universities or in communities. You're seeing young people leading petitions online, leading campaigns. And so all this engagement that's happening, for me, all of those are success, because the moment you're able to bring people together, and the moment they're able to collectively work on something, you're already building peace. Because if you're already cultivating harmony and good relations at that stage, then the ripple effect will pour into the community. So, leading collective action, young people are co-creating peace building interventions with different organizations. They're advising institutions. And my favorite is that young people are holding decision makers accountable. They're asking questions, and they're saying that as young people, we want the best. We want what is right to be done.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I think one of the key takeaways from what you said is that there is no like one single way or like one predetermined way in which young people contribute to peace and security. It is something that can happen in very diverse manners. You can start as you did by writing, but there's also young people contributing with sports, with arts, and overall, as you said, with well-being.
Or even through this podcast, a lot of media, a lot of
Yes.
information out there. Yeah.
No, true. It's right. Even with podcasts, with movies, I think it's there's no limits. And as you said, there is, yes, sorry, as you said, there's also a nexus between young people and development and peace, because if there's no development, if there is no well-being, then the likelihood of engaging in other actions that will not lead to peace is very likely. So thank you for highlighting that. I think it was a very valuable point that is adding to this conversation. And as you said, it's the young people face challenges when they are fostering peace. Could you please delve into that a little bit more? Which do you think are the challenges that they experience when they try to engage in peace building locally and internationally? And in your experience, how do you think these challenges can be addressed effectively?
Yeah. I think the most common response is under resourcing, and that's true for many youth peace builders, that there aren't enough resources, whether you look at it from a funding standpoint, human resource, financial resource, political goodwill. A lot of youth peace building work is under resourced. However, I just wanted to move away from that and highlight other issues that, okay, if you fund young people, they're still experiencing other challenges. One is the fact that in many countries, especially countries that are under repressive regimes or countries that are still very colonial in their approach, there's criminalization of the youth identity and youth activism and youth peace building in general, where you find that young people who speak out more often, who call out leaders more often, they're criminalized, they're profiled, they're targeted. It doesn't have to be targeted from a point of physical violence, but we've seen reputational damage to a lot of youth peace builders, where because you're working with a particular group of people trying to rehabilitate them, then you're associated to be one of them. So, for example, if you're rehabilitating young people who've maybe been radicalized into terrorism, then you're likely to be profiled as a terrorist yourself if you're speaking out against certain injustices. So that criminalization is very harmful because it's not only damaging the youth peace builders' morale or esteem, but also its reputational. Like you could face like lifetime imprisonment, or you could face like a reputational damage that you could never overcome. So this is very huge. And then the other one is, we have competing life priorities. And even just speaking for myself, a lot of the youth peace building work that I've done has been voluntary. So it's me using my own resources, my own time, uncompensated, to be able to do this work. Now, that works for only a short period of time. Over time, if you can't put food on your table, then you can't be a peace builder. If you can't earn an income, if you can't pay your rent, you also have other life priorities, perhaps a career, and the career isn't necessarily in development. So, how the whole idea around young people, even as peace builders, having other parts of their lives that also need to be nourished. And the assumption that because we are young, we have the time and the energy is a wrong assumption that gets a lot of young people either tokenized or exploited. Which brings me to my next challenge, that is tokenization of youth voices. It's very common to see, young people are in the room, and we are there in the room, but you find that, I just give an example where you find that if it's a global conference, there's one youth speaker, and that's good, but the youth speaker will speak last. They probably have less time to speak. It's all of these challenges. They may not seem big, but they really demotivate peace builders and activists, where you're included but you're not meaningfully engaged, or you're included but you're not really heard. So even when you share your opinions, they never make it to the outcome of the process, whether that's a document or a process. You don't see where your input went into. So you have a lot of youth peace builders using their own resources to do work that is never actually considered or taken into account. So it's kind of like a waste of resources. And then there's, the systemic and deliberate exclusion of certain youth identities. We're talking about refugees. We're talking about young women in certain contexts. We're talking about LGBTQ youth. We're talking about youth with disability, youth from certain states, the young people in Gaza. All of these people they've been systemically excluded. And so even though, as a peace builder, you want, and I really I like being young, because I think that with more generations, we're having a more empathetic generation, a more inclusive generation. When I engage with the younger generation, Gen Zs and the next, they're more inclusive than my peers are. And so there's that idea around, okay, we are inclusive, but when we go to the decision making spaces, suddenly now we start to realize, oh, okay, so we're not all the same. And then finally, ageism and lack of appreciation of youth peace building efforts. And often when we bring this up, you hear, oh, but youth have been recognized, they've been mentioned, the word youth is there. But appreciating peace building efforts is also about compensating young people for their time. It's also about recognizing their expertise and taking it into account. And it's also about understanding that, youth are just youth, and they may be youth, but they're also other things. They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're artists, they're musicians. And so they have other parts that they can contribute to the youth peace building space other than their contribution and age. So, it's not just about saying, oh, we don't have a youth, let's bring a youth, but thinking, how do we systemically include young people in the discussion?
Thank you. Some very important points that you have touched in your answer. And I definitely think that this was a very comprehensive list of challenges, but at the same time, it's very good because whoever is listening maybe can help from their own field to make it better for young people to be engaged more meaningfully in peace building. And I think that is a key word that we cannot forget. It is to be included in a meaningful way. Because as you said, there's always the risk of tokenism, which is, for those who are not familiar with the term, I think Wevyn explained it very well, but just maybe to summarize it, is when, for example, you just include young people in a room or in a panel and they want to necessarily do something substantive. It's just to say that there was young people in the room. And that's what tokenism stands for. It's just, like having a token, having a check mark.
You're a trophy. Yeah, you're a trophy for the event. Like, oh, look, here's our young person,
Exactly. And it should go beyond that. So I think this is something that I would love to keep, as in the top of the, of the important comments that have been said so far for those who are listening. So in order to support young people to be peace builders, it's as well important to support in their development, and as well to support with many other things as resources. It is, as you said it as your first point, and I think it's on the top, because it's true that without resources it's very hard to participate in almost anything, not only in peace building but in any other topic related to development. It's very complicated for young people to do it. And I just want to go back quickly to something that you said, and I had never thought about it like that. So I think it's very interesting, because you said that there's this stereotype that young people are like, oh, they're full of energy and they are like so excited all the time, so they can do it. I think I used to believe that way, because I am also young, and I would say like, I'm young, I'm energized, I mean, I'm willing to do it even if I don't get paid. But if you think about it, that's even a stereotype that cannot be good in the long term, because of course I think that it's okay. I think in a way that is something that distinguishes young people, and it's true that the majority are just genuinely excited. But if they are very excited to participate in these processes, I think it's also because they are not normally given the opportunity to participate in the first place. So that's why when you get the chance, you are like, oh yes, I'm so excited, I cannot complain, or I cannot like ask for more because I have already just been given one opportunity to say one word. So I don't know, this is something that really changed.
And on the other side, they also will take. We've given you an opportunity and we'll keep taking. And many people don't ask, how do we keep the excitement of young people? It's not always money, but how do you keep young people excited so that they can continue to meaningfully engage? That's a question that, has no one answer. But I think it's something that we have to constantly think about, because for some people, the motivation is just that, to speak. And for some people, it's to be a part of something bigger. And for others, it's just, like for me, when I started, like youth activism and youth engagement was a good way to meet people from other countries, other communities, and that in itself was good enough for me. So I think we have to constantly, ask ourselves, depending on the young people that we're working with, how do we keep them meaningfully engaged? How do we keep them excited and energetic?
That's completely true. And it's also true that, again, like you can be excited genuinely, and it's not just because you are just given the opportunity to speak that one time that you're going to be very excited, or to be engaged in a process, but maybe you're just genuinely excited. And I think that's also something that we share. Like, we are passionate about what we're doing, and there's sometimes when you're willing to do things just because you're passionate about it, and you don't need to get any kind of payment or anything. But then, but I just thought that that was a very interesting example that could happen. It could be the case for some, to understand why is it that there's this stereotype of young people are always excited. And I think, in a way it can be true for many, but as well, it was something very interesting that I never really thought about it until you put it on the table. So thank you for highlighting that. And well, sorry, you were gonna say something?
No.
Wonderful.
All good.
Thank you. So just talking about some characteristics that are associated with youth that might not be true for everyone, but it's true that it's true for a majority, is that young people are very engaged in social media and in technology. It's a preferred way of communication for many people to use social media, especially many young people. And then in this regard, they have become powerful tools for mobilizing messages and mobilizing support for peace. So could you let us know, how can these platforms be harnessed most effectively to amplify the voice of young peace builders, and how is it that young peace builders have been using these channels to spread their actions?
So social media is really big, and technology more broadly. And personally, I started my activism using social media because it was the most available resource for me. I was already online. I was already scrolling a lot, so it felt like I could already tap into this. So a good way is to tap into trends on social media that are really popular amongst young people. One of the initiatives that I ran in 2020 during COVID time was, we actually used memes and jokes and all these like funny GIFs to communicate civic engagement messages through Instagram. And we felt like, okay, people already like memes, so this is an easy way to do it. We like memes, people like memes. Let's engage people civically, teach them about the Constitution and their rights using this approach. So, I mean, trends could be different. Right now, it's a lot of TikTok dancing. It's a lot of YouTube shorts. So just look at what are young people talking about and what are they into, and then how can you tap into that so that you're having a much bigger audience. Then, of course, storytelling and creative messaging. It's very powerful to share our stories. And we can do that just from our individual platforms. But there are also platforms that, we could tap into, forums, digital forums, other blogs, where we could tell our stories and also inspire change. Collaborating with creators and other peace builders or other organizations to be able to produce knowledge and content that can be consumed online. Right now we have we have this thing around a short span. So if it's not 15 seconds, people switch off. So this is where, as young people, our creativity can come in. If you already like a 15-second video with the message, how can you turn your key message into that 15-second video? Collaborate with other creators, whether you're sharing your story or not, and then tap into trends so that you're reaching a bigger audience. But also, even as I talk about social media, I think it's important to just highlight other factors that, as young peace builders, we need to be considering more, in as much as we may not have the resources or the capacity to, or even the patience to. I think it's something that we need to consider. One is, there's so much focus on going viral, but going viral isn't always impact, right? So if you're using social media, you're always like, oh, checking how many people engaged with your content, how many people saw it. And of course, in the world of today, we are tempted to want to go viral. But when it comes to social impact, quality always beats quantity. It's not about reaching 10,000. It's about getting even 100 to act, to take action. So action is different. Awareness has to be accompanied with action. Knowing is not enough. Action, and it doesn't have to be as big as people can imagine. It could be even something like changing your own behavior. So how many people are you getting to take action through your social media? Those are the metrics that you should be measuring yourself against, not followers, not likes, not comments. Then the other thing I think we need to think about more is the ethical use of data and the ethical use of social media. So we work, as peace builders, we work with very vulnerable groups. So it's not about sharing the stories, storytelling and inspiring action through stories, but also how do we preserve the dignity of the communities that we serve, and how do we honor them? How do we uphold their rights so that we are not stuck in the cycle of harm that has been there over the years? And then finally is, the use of inclusive and accessible language. I think that this is something that it's probably an under-resources issue, but I worry a lot about young people with hearing challenges, with visual challenges. How are they getting all of these messages from social media? Because not all platforms are as accessible as we'd like to think. The language we use, inclusivity is not just about maybe translating it into Spanish and French and Portuguese and local languages. As young peace builders, we have to recognize that we're very different and we have different privileges and power. For example, I consider myself an elite youth. So I'm educated, I can communicate, and I have to think about this when I'm putting out narratives, right? So who is going to read? Can they read? Can they understand? Can they, what is it that they will resonate with in the language? So that's all I will say for this.
Thank you so much. It's definitely, again, a very comprehensive answer. And I think it's true that we need to think about accessibility in a deeper way. Because it's true that it's a good way to start with languages, like translating it. And especially, I think about translating to a language, like, for example, in Spanish, is good. But then if you think about specific cases, there's a lot of indigenous groups that have a language that is not usually prioritized in translations. So I think it's also important to consider that. For example, in some Spanish-speaking countries, many people that speak indigenous language do not speak Spanish or speak it in a very limited extent. So I think it's important then to consider accessibility going beyond, and exactly as you were saying, making sure that the message reaches those who need it the most. It's not about, wow, the video got 20 million likes and I don't know, the account now has like 4,000 followers. It's about making sure that there is an action. And overall, completely agree with the points. They are very valuable in order to use social media, both like to mobilize young people and how young people can use it to lead to peace building efforts.
Just a sec, can I open the door? Of course. I'll keep our leaders on toes to be able to do the work. So funding has to be flexible, has also to be co-funding, because we know that not all the peace building needs are in the programs exactly, but you need funding to establish strong youth organizations, and then also to strengthen and diversify the participation mechanisms for meaningful youth engagement. I would like to see a future where you don't have to be a youth activist. You don't have to be leading or part of a youth civil society organization or a social enterprise to understand what peace and security efforts are going on in your country. That is perceived as a civic duty, not just for the young people, but also for the state and other institutions. And so with that recognition, how can we create more opportunities for young people to engage? Some may like to engage in campaigns, others not so much. So that's kind of like the future that I'd want to see. More power to young people.
Thank you for sharing this vision with us. And well, you're also part of making this vision a reality. I mean, you are contributing and you have contributed to making peace building inclusive, making it the way that you described it. And about this, I wanted to talk more about an initiative that you had. You talked to us a little bit about how you started your journey in the beginning of the episode, but now I want to delve into the Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. So can you please share with us more about this initiative? Please share an overview with us and what are the mission and the primary objectives of it.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I really like talking about the coalition because I think for me, initiating the coalition, of course, in collaboration with other young leaders, was for me, first of all, trying to implement the YPS agenda as a youth leader. And I'll explain. So previously, I started my peace building work in Kenya, and then I had an opportunity to work in New York, again on peace building, youth peace and security, and women peace and security. And for those 2 years, I was able to get firsthand knowledge and experience of how member states work, how policies are formulated, are implemented, adopted. And after those 2 years, coming back to Kenya, I thought, okay, what can I do with this knowledge? How can I localize this knowledge? And so I started reaching out to a couple of other young people, just telling them, like, can we come together as a network and mobilize for collective action, especially in national implementation of the youth peace and security agenda. So that's the story behind the coalition. And informally started the discussions in June of 2022. And in September of 2022, I returned to Kenya. So from June to September, I was starting the discussions in New York, talking to different organizations, how do we create this network, learning from the countries that had already started, like Finland. And so September 2022, went back to Kenya with a couple of other leaders, started the coalition. In December, we launched it. And we launched it with 120 organizations. And now the coalition has grown to over 200 youth-led organizations. So when you look at organizations, youth-led organizations, they represent many other people. So it's not just one person, but they represent networks. And so we're looking at thousands of young people engaged through the coalition, and the coalition itself as the vehicle for championing YPS implementation in Kenya. So its primary objectives was, one, to mobilize young people in Kenya, create awareness on the youth peace and security agenda, and take action in terms of, advocating for the implementation and the localization of this agenda in Kenya. At the beginning, we didn't have like a clear plan, or rather like a determined outcome, like we have to develop the national action plan. But as we started engaging, it seemed like the most natural outcome, or rather outcomes of this engagement. The coalition itself engages young people through the networks and through the movements, but also the coalition secretariat that comes from different organizations. They go into the communities and they partner with local governments and local actors to hold consultations at the county level. So there's a lot of community engagement at the local level. We have social media advocacy through Twitter, and then as well through the youth-led organizations and movements.
All right. Thank you for sharing about how you started with this coalition and how it's engaging with youth. And I just had a question, because now that you say it, it sounds amazing. You said 120 organizations, and my question is, how did you manage to get 119? Because I imagine you were the 20th organization, or How did you and your team, or whoever you were working with, how did you all manage to get on board 119 organizations around? Is this around the? No, it's only in Kenya, because you mentioned some other countries as well.
Only in Kenya, and initially they were only from about 25 counties. Kenya has 47 counties, so I'd say half the country. But, starting with that thought, going into discussing with other youth peace builders, then initially we formed a committee that then thought through, okay, what should the network look like? How will we recruit members? So there was an initial committee before that really thought through this. And these are organizations that have been working on YPS or youth peace builders themselves. So it was by young people, for young people. And then the initial committee grew to about 20 members. And then we put out an open call. So the open call went out with a summary of what YPS is, what the coalition is about, and who can join. And we did open it out to individuals as well, because we know that not all youth peace builders run organizations, right? So we have peace building organizations, and we also have youth peace builders. And then we have members from, that are not youth organizations that come in as, I'd say, ex-official members, so representation from the government, from the development partners, and other civil society organizations that are youth-serving but not necessarily youth-led. So members are all youth-led. So through this open call, and during the 5th anniversary of YPS, that's in the 7th anniversary, that's in 2022, we held a week-long campaign. And we use that as a way to recruit youth members. But I think just to say that one of the things that really helped was because I was already in the networks, I was already leading youth peace building efforts. So it was a matter of bringing my peers and then asking them, who else do you know that can join this? And then over time, once we started engaging, especially on Twitter, then social media became a great mobilizing tool. The more activities we did, the more other organizations found us and also were interested. And now I'm really proud that it's outgrown the initial idea. It's grown beyond the initial idea. The leadership has grown, and they're now on their way, actually, to developing Kenya's first national action plan on youth peace and security.
That is impressive.
And also,
Sorry. I was so excited. I just said that is impressive, but please go ahead and finish what you were going to say.
I just remembered that, for me, when I said it was also a test for me for how to implement YPS is when I was initiating the process, I was 28 years old. So the age bracket for youth, according to the UN, is 30. I think 29 or 30, and then you have in many African countries being 35. And one of the things we see in the youth peace building and activism space is because of all these challenges, young people also have gotten too attached to power. So you lead, you get the benefits of leading, and then you don't want to step aside for other young people to lead. So I told myself, I'm going to start this, lead for a year, and then step back and pass it on to the next. And at the time, actually, we had gotten 2 grants. So I had supported in fundraising to get 2 grants to kickstart the process of the consultations. And I had people telling me, you're going to step aside now when the money is finally coming in. Because for 1 year, I was running the coalition for free with my other colleagues, 4 other colleagues. And it's almost like a full-time job because you're dealing with 100 members. And then right at that point, 1 year, I was like, this was my commitment, 1 year, and I have to step back and allow the new leadership to come, newer blood. I was still young, but I had engaged in the YPS space for 6 years. I thought it was well in a lot of time. And we have to be able to step back so other young people can step up, otherwise we will be repeating the same cycles of the dynamics that we don't really want in the youth space. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. No, and I will add, I will echo what I had said. It's impressive now that I hear the whole explanation. So not only that, the coalition, first, it's impressive that, again, you and your team managed to get 190 people, organization, persons, individuals into the coalition. That is something that I commend. I think it's very hard to do it, especially because of all the challenges we mentioned that young people in peace building face. And as you said, you were running it for free. So it's something commendable that you managed to establish it. And then I also, that's why I say that I wanted to replicate the how impressive I am, how impressed, I am, because I think it's also wonderful that you think about the importance of letting other young people come in. And I think that is also something that speaks a lot about how you see that you have gotten so far as an activist and with your job in peace building and in youth peace and security. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left, but I would love for you to share with the audience a final advice that you would give to young people who are passionate about contributing to peace and security, but may not know where to start, how to begin, or how to do it.
Yeah. So I'll just start with a simple cliche, which is start with what you have. Start with what you have. And what you have could be a talent. For me, it was writing. And I wasn't necessarily the best writer, but I could put something together. I could express myself in an article. And so that's how I started 7 years ago, actually, writing with no skills. So you could be a writer, you could be an artist, maybe you can create things, maybe you can speak. That's already a tool that you can use. Now you need tools, you need resources, you need information. When it comes to information, we have ChatGPT, we have blogs, we have organizations. There isn't really, in fact, we're suffering from a lot of information. There's a lot of information out there. So find credible organizations, institutions that work with young people. And, you can always check credibility from their platforms, from their websites. You can ask people, find out what they're doing and if you can be a part of it. A lot of organizations have volunteer opportunities, internship opportunities, and these are ways to start, especially if you're just trying to build the skill and the experience. And most importantly, find a group and find a network that you can join. There's a lot of power in people coming together. There's a lot of information. So find a network or a group near you. It could be virtual, it could be in person, where you just meet with other young people and talk. I think the idea that for you to build peace, that you have to have a project or you have to do some sort of designed intervention, is somehow misconstrued, or it's a false assumption. Because if we come together as 4 young people, sharing our struggles, encouraging each other, keeping each other sane, that in itself is enough to be able to say we've kept 4 people out of violence just because we're able to support each other. And so imagine what the effect is if there's a lot of networks like that and a lot of groups like that of young people supporting each other. Youth peace building and youth activism can be quite a painful journey. So if you can do it alongside other young people, then you'll be able to, to stay the path. And I say this out of my own experience. The only reason I've been able to keep at it this long, despite all these challenges, is because I can't really take away the value that I've gotten from learning and collaborating with other young people. So that's my advice. Start with what you have and just do it.
Thank you, Wevyn, for this wonderful advice. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us everything that you have done, as well as your thoughts and insights on youth peace and security. And thank you to everyone who listened to this episode of the Young Changemakers podcast. See you later.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Young Changemakers podcast. The show is produced by Global Changemakers, and it is edited and mixed by me, Megan Diaz. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure to tap the bell icon to get a notification when we publish new episodes. And of course, please visit global-changemakers.net to access our full archive and resources available for you. Thank you.